nobody came to eat in the restaurant owned by the people who raised the town's only N-word lover. And that's what they became. It was hard on my mother, but my father said, let the SOBs eat someplace else. I never wanted to wait on them anyway. He didn't need those people. And he said, a man's judged by the company he keeps, and the best of company is none too good. Now, the people who were coming in there, as far as he was concerned, when they stopped coming, that meant the best of company is none too good. The best of company didn't refuse to go to the restaurant. It was as simple as that. He refused to let other people define him. He refused to be told how to live by other people, and that's what he told us. You know what you are, you know what you can do, now do it. If you think you're smarter than that guy is, prove it. And if you can't prove it, then shut up. It's that simple. And he was a high school graduate who got married at the age of 18 to a woman who was to a girl who was 15 and proceeded to lead a moral life. And that's what he did.
Well, speaking of education, you have said that we have to re-educate the educators. Talk about how we would go about doing that. Where does that begin in this society?
You refuse, even if you've already signed a contract for next year. Most of these teachers signed a contract a month ago or 2 months ago. If you've already signed a contract for next year, I believe that every practicing educator has to read at least, oh my Lord, they have to read The Color of Law. If you haven't read The Color of Law, you don't know, and the devil, if you're a white person, you haven't read The Color of Law, you don't know what you're talking about, because you think that segregation is something people of color choose. Many people of color think they chose to be segregated, but you read this book, and we wrote laws to prevent you from being integrated. You need to understand that the people like Thomas Jefferson and every president we have ever had, and every mayor and every senator and every member of the House of Representatives were convinced that the myth of race was right, that there are 3 or 4 different races, and there are not. There's only one race. It's the human race, and we are all members of it. But if you don't know that, if you are convinced that there are several different races, you write laws that you think will make all those folks behave in the way that they should. It's only when you get people educated. If you can't think of any other way to do it, force them to read this magazine, the April 2018 issue of the National Geographic magazine. You see those 2 little girls? Those are twin girls. Are they biracial? Are they biracial?
They look biracial, but
no, they don't.
They look biracial as far.
No, they don't. No, they, by God, do not. There's only one race. Neither of those girls came from outer space. They are not biracial. They are multicolored, maybe, but they aren't biracial. We've got to get rid of the word biracial and the word multiracial and racial groupings, because there's only one race. These girls are not biracial. Now, you get this. I hate to argue with you, but I've heard that so often. And people say to me, I'm biracial. And I say, oh, which of your parents came from outer space? Well, neither one of them. Then, my dear, you are not biracial. You can't tell me what to say. I can tell you what to say when you're in my presence, because I won't accept that. There are no biracial people.
Right.
Get over it. We've all been conditioned to the myth.
We know what everybody means when they say biracial, and not wanting to exclude or to let people know that they are a part of the superior race, or a superior race other than Black.
But you have to realize, you know as well as I do, that we invent the language to perpetuate the problem.
Absolutely.
And that's exactly the reason teachers have to be re-educated. Teachers will stand up in August, at the end of August. Teachers are going to stand up in front of students, and they're going to say, when I see people, I don't see people as black or brown or red or yellow. I just see people as people. And some wise little black boy or girl is going to say, you didn't say white. Do you see white people? And she's going to say, now, I don't want to hear any more of that nonsense out of you. You know what I meant. And the kid's going to say, yeah, what you mean is it's okay to be white, but you don't want to see any of those of us who are another color. We have to re-educate the teachers. We have to take teachers into a group, better small group, because you don't want to destroy a lot of them at once, and hand out a box of Crayola crayons and say, now you're going to teach your students colors. First thing I want you to learn is the most important color. take out the white color. They're going to take out the white color. Now hold it against your hand. And those teachers are going to say, uh-huh. And you're going to say, and you look at my shirt. Is my shirt white?
It is.
Is my skin white then?
Your skin is not white, no.
Hell no, it's not white, neither is anybody else's. My skin is a shade of brown.
You're closer to me. You're a few shades lighter. You're a few shades lighter than me.
Yeah, but I'm still not white, am I?
Right. No, you're not white.
And teachers do that with kids. This is a white crayon. And any little kid who puts their crayon up against their hand has to say, oh, what else do you lie about, fool? Because that's a lie. There are no white people. We are all shades of brown. We have to get rid of that word because it's a lie. But as long as, and if you think, look at here, you see this? This is in the National Geographic magazine for that, in that issue. These are people who have found their color on the Pantone color line. And there's a number under each one of these. Instead of calling your students black, brown, or any other color, get the Pantone color line, have them stand up beside it and say, now look at there, your number this, your number this, your number this. Somebody has said a couple months ago, some female said to me, a liberal woman said, I don't want to have a color to follow me through life. I said, oh, you pay into Social Security? Well, yes. Well, isn't that a number? Well, and I don't want a number. I don't want a number. We don't want to be called a number. We want to be seen as human beings. All right, if you're going to be seen as human beings, you're going to be seen as members of the human race. And there's only one. There's only one race, it's the human race. Teachers ought to, and if you want to have a decent classroom, teachers must be required to read Racial Conditioning of Our Children by Nathan Rutstein. If you haven't read this book, you need to get it, and you need to insist that every teacher every educator in the country today reads this book. The subtitle is Ending Psychological Genocide in the Schools. Because what we're doing with Black children in the schools is psychological genocide. If you wonder why people of color don't live up to your expectations of them, it's because many of them are so used to living down to teachers' expectations of them. We decide which children are going to succeed when they walk into our classroom in the morning, and woe be unto that child who fails to live down to our expectations of them. We aren't as bothered by those who fail to live up to our expectations because we know there's hope for them. But those who live down to our expectations are saying that we don't know how to judge our children, and we don't. Our educators are schooled with the same thing, the same conditioning that all the rest of us have had. And until we end the conditioning, until we stop teaching the myth of race, that's how long we'll have racism in this country. And there's a book, which is a beautiful book. It's called The Myth of Race, written by Robert Wald Sussman. Everybody should read it. But what you need to realize is the only mistake he made was he called it the myth of race. A myth is something we make up to explain something in nature that we don't understand. So we make up a myth. Like the Greeks believed that they taught a myth that the sun was a god that goes across the sky in a golden chariot every morning. It was a myth. The myth of race isn't a myth, it's a lie that was deliberately made up to justify the killing of people of color during the Spanish Inquisition. The lie of race started at that time. Before that, there were people of all colors, no problem. There were different cultures, there were different nationalities, there were lots of different things, lots of different colors, but it wasn't a matter of race. It's only been in the last between 500 and 600 years that we have been teaching the lie of race. It is not a myth. Give it up. And if you don't want to read the whole book, just read the last 2 paragraphs of the last page of that book. And it will tell you there is no doubt that what you and I, every person in that room and every person on the earth, are 30th to 50th cousins, because we are all descendants of those first Black modern human beings that evolved in sub-Saharan Africa between 300,000 and 500,000 years ago. Every person on the face of the earth. If we would all trace our DNA back as far as we could, we would find that a percentage of our DNA came from a country in Africa. So let's get over it. It's time to stop it. Now, if teachers haven't read this book, which is terribly heavy because they used a kind of paper I've never encountered before, if you haven't read Sapiens, get it and read it. It is a brief history of humankind. It will tell you exactly how it happened, when it happened, where it happened, and you look around you and you know why it happened. It happened because racism is a moneymaker. It's a really good economic plan to keep some people in a situation where they expect to work for less, fewer hours a week, so you don't have to pay benefits or insurance, keep them in a situation where they aren't making enough money to afford good housing, keep them in substandard housing, say it's because they don't know anything, and ignore, oh my God, work hard at ignoring the fact that those first Black modern human beings were able to leave the area around the equator and move and populate every landmass on the face of the earth without any modern technology. Now you tell me how some people who aren't creative and intelligent and courageous and curious could possibly do that. Oh my God. You see, the lie of race is so unreasonable and so ridiculous that when you think of it in those terms, you have to say to yourself, oh, what have we lost here? What has this cost us? What have we not taken advantage of? That we'll let you sing and we'll let you dance, but we don't want you to write the laws. If you haven't read the book, The Color of Law, get it and read it. It will shiver you, it will shake you down to your bootstraps. These people who wrote the laws, including the Constitution, believed in the myth of the lie of race. You have to read this book in order to realize that segregation in this country, most of the segregation in this country is de jure, not de facto, because we write laws to segregate people deliberately because we are so ignorant as to believe that there are 3 or 4 different races. And we elect people to Congress who believe that. And we elect presidents who believe that.
Absolutely.
And then we live with the hell that we have created.
Yes.
Well, how do you define being an educator versus a teacher?
It didn't take me long to realize that teaching meant I should train people to behave in certain prescribed ways and to get them ready for the end of year testing. That isn't what I wanted to do. I wanted to get them ready for the end of their lives. I wanted to get them ready for the rest of their lives. I wanted to get them ready to be parts of society. I thought that was important. I got my education at the university, at what was Iowa State Teachers College at that time, and they believed in active learning, and they believed you should get those kids out of those desks and get them involved in what you're doing. And so I set up, and I had a critic teacher when I did my student teaching. I was one of the first group that they sent out of town to little towns to do our student teaching. I was lucky enough to teach under Hazel Grant, who was the 3rd grade teacher and the principal of that school. And she said, these kids, instead of teaching the 3 R's of reading, writing, and arithmetic, you teach the 3 R's of rights, respect, and responsibility. Any machine, any computer can teach you reading, writing, and arithmetic. And you need to realize that only one of those words begins with R. Writing begins with a W and arithmetic begins with an A. So that in itself is totally ridiculous. And she said, and she taught, reading, writing, and arithmetic is just, you see, that's part of our conditioning. If
I do recall that. I do recall that. You got to know the 3 R's, the reading, writing,
arithmetic. 3 R's. Yeah, and you think to yourself, wait a minute, you have to leave the A off arithmetic to do that, and you have to take the W off writing. So you see, that's what our education does. It teaches one thing, but it practices another. We teach in opposition to what we're practicing, and we practice in opposition to what we're teaching. So she taught me to teach in a cooperative competition. Her classroom was cooperative competition. You all had to help in the role that you were in for the week to see to it that your group got enough points to get into the grab bag at the end of the week. And the roles changed every week, and the role leaders changed every week. So when I did that with my students in 3rd grade in Riceville, Iowa, the teacher said I was bribing those kids. And I said, wait a minute, you get paid at the end of the month? Well, yes. You call that bribery? I work hard for what I make. I say, so do my students. Students work hard for what they made. They got paid at the end of the week if they'd worked hard enough. I believe that we could set up a society in which people are part of the mosaic. A mosaic is an art form that is made up of many different elements and is absolutely beautiful. That, as far as I'm concerned, is what this society is. It is not made up of many different races. It is made up of many members of the human race, all of whom can be different colors, different shapes, different sizes, different genders, just different gender tendencies, different nationalities, different cultures, but they are all members of the same damn race. And I'm tired of people saying to me, I'm biracial. My parents were biracial, and I just explode now because, and that's the reason a lot of people don't talk to me, because they don't want me to explode on them. But they know that they're going to say something racist. It's automatic. And when I walk into a room, everybody just shuts up because they're afraid I'm going to say, what did you say? Look, fool, what did you just say? And nobody wants to go through that.
Right.
John, you had a question?
Yes, Ms. Jane, do you see any difference between from the time you started this beautiful thing that you're doing right now and now?
I can't hear you.
Can't hear me? You can hear me now?
A little.
Okay. Do you what change do you see from the time you started? Started doing this here then and now? Because
I think we were making, I'm sorry, I think we were making progress. I really think we were. The civil rights movement was making progress, and that upset a whole lot of white men. And so they allowed the women's movement to join the fray. And the minute the women's movement came in, we stopped putting our emphasis on the civil rights movement, because the women's movement was mostly about white women. They might as well, in some places, they might have well been wearing signs that said Black women need not apply, because the situation has not changed greatly for Black women in this country. You need to realize that my heroes are Black women, because they keep on keeping on no matter what we do to them. No matter what you do to them, no matter what you do to their sons and their daughters, you can't stop them. And that should tell us something about supremacy, about superiority, about the ability to cope with ugliness. But then I thought that things were getting better. And then Barack Obama got elected to the presidency. And I thought, now I'll never have to do this again. I was so pleased at the progress that we had made. And then as a result of white people seeing, and there are no white people, but pale skins seeing a Black man in their White House, racism sort of went underground. But all the time that Barack Obama was there, I have a feeling, and I've heard this and I've seen this evidence of it, that white people were just biding their time until they got that man out of that White House. And that's the reason we have the person we have there today, is a direct reaction to having a Black man in the White House. I remember when Richard Nixon told a group of pale-faced reporters, I'm trying to save the White House for you white people. And I remember Ronald Reagan standing and saying, we built a shining city on a hill. And I thought, you fool, we built it on the bones of Black and brown men. How dare you stand there and say that? That's your shining city? I was furious. I was absolutely furious. You see, and you can't get to be my age. You can't have lived for 86 years in this situation and not see what happened over the years and how it happened. You just can't do that unless you are in denial. And some Black person has said denial is not just a river in Egypt. It's also what we white folks are involved in on a daily basis. We have to pretend that we're all right. And when somebody comes along that proves that there's somebody just as right but not as white, then we've got to destroy that person. In this country, we think that different faces mean different races. And we are as wrong can be. And unfortunately for all of us, some Black people also go along with that, because it's better to go along and get along than it is to be, because you know what'll happen if you stick your head up. And if you didn't know before, in the last 3 weeks, we have proven to Black mothers and to their Black sons what can happen to you if you get out of line where the cops are concerned. I am sick and tired of having children of color have to watch that killing of that young black male by those 4 cops. And it's over and over and over. Now, I know that they are justifying showing that by saying, white people need to see how horrible this is. No, we needed to see it several times, but you don't, for the love of God and black children, how dare you put that out there in front of those black boys and their black mothers day after day after day? How dare you do that? I want to know how you justify that. And I want to know why somebody, why a whole bunch of people are at the network's offices saying that enough is enough. This looks to me like attempted intimidation.
Yes.
And I think that's what's going on. It doesn't mean what you meant by what you did. What matters is how it is perceived. Exactly. Now, I know I'm weird, but I perceive that as being attempted intimidation. And I'll never forget the black woman who we were doing a thing on differences, a white man on my left and this black woman on my right, and heads of departments in a major university. And we were going to talk about differences. And the woman said, a white person in the audience said, why do we have to talk about differences? Similarities are more important than differences, and we're all more similar than we are different. I said, well, I'll show you. So I did the differences thing. And I asked the white male man, well, I said, there we stood. And I said, now, do you educated people see any differences here? And I just prayed that they wouldn't flunk the test. And immediately the first one they said was height. And I thought, well, they did it. They flunked the miserable test. That's the first thing they saw was height. And that black woman was as black as you can be. But that's the first difference they saw. We went through that. The white man said, no, his height is important to him. Does it give you power? Yes. Black woman, is your height important to you? Yes. Does it give you power? No, but there are some other things we have to deal with. I said, we're going to deal with it. I said, you see any other differences? So then they saw gender. Gender, yeah, but yes, it gives him power, but there's some other things to deal with. You see any other age? So we went through age. Finally, somebody said, in that group of educated educators, color. I said, are you talking about skin color or hair color? Skin color. I said to this white man, is your skin color important to you? He said, I never have to think of it. And I thought, you horses, Fanny, you should not have said that. And I said, did you earn your skin color? No. Does it give you power? Yes. Are you afraid of anything? No, I'm not afraid of anything. I said to this black woman, is your skin color important to you? And she waited a long time. And finally she said, and she was taller than he was. She said, I'm going to say something that I've never said before. And I said, that's because, she said, because I'm ashamed of it. And I said, that would be, she said, I have 2 children. I hate to tell this. It makes me sick whenever I tell it. She said, I have 2 children. They're both daughters. Both times when I was pregnant, I prayed that I wouldn't have a son. I said, and that's because, she said, because I didn't want to think about what he would have to put up with and what I would have to do when I lost him. And by now there was one tear slowly making its way down that beautiful black woman's face. You could have heard a feather fall in that room. The only sound you heard was this man beside me going, and I thought, cry, you miserable SOB. How dare you be this ignorant? And you're a college instructor. What kind of human being are you? I was furious.
Well, let me just say, let me just add from the perspective of being a black woman and having 2 black boys. I felt everything that you shared, and we fear for our sons every single day of their lives when they step outside of the door. You know, as a black woman, you know, we have to constantly prove ourselves. In addition to all the multitasking and just taking care of our children and instilling principles so they can make it in this white America, okay? You know, aside from all of that, our struggle in part is having to juggle all of these tasks. And one of those tasks is not being overly aggressive, not being too passive, yet still trying to prove ourselves. And it's just unfortunate and sad that though we are the most educated in the world, we are less likely to be promoted or receive recognition in the workplace. And that's just the reality that we live in. And the fact that we are still here fighting for our families, fighting for our children, and our voices are continually being muted. is a miracle, really, that we're still here. I think we lost Jane. So give us one moment and we will get her back. I think, you know, the stories that she's shared with us while we wait for Jane to come back. I want to apologize to our audience. We had a really difficult start. We ran into a few issues streaming. So after all the preparation, we had a few streaming issues, and we're waiting for Jane to return right now.
The new technology.
The new technology, it failed me. So it was a rough start, but in spite of that, we're kind of getting it together.
Some of the issues she brought up are poignant and to the point. And I find it's almost incredible to understand how we're even still getting along in this country together, and keeping it together as much as we are. We've been through so much. It's been 50 years, a little over 50 years now since Martin Luther King was assassinated. And we're still dealing with the same
thing. Welcome back, Jane. Sorry we lost you. Yes, we're dealing with the same issues. And as Jane mentioned earlier, she talked about the stop sign and how it was invented by a Black man. America, and you also said that America was built on the back of Blacks, even though so many don't want to acknowledge that. And yet we still have yet to reap the benefits of that. It's been buried so deep that a significant amount of our ancestors' accomplishments and even their own identity can't even be recovered in this lifetime. And even though we built this nation, when it comes to wealth, Blacks have made little to no progress in the past 50 years, as you said, TD, past 50, 60 years, little to no progress. So how do we even begin to balance the racial wealth gap? How do we even do that?
Let me say this quickly because I have another interview coming at 1 o'clock. Here's what we have to do. You have to realize that and this is the reason we're having a lot of problems right now. The demographics say that within 30 years, white people will have become a numerical minority in the United States of America. Mm-hmm. White people, many of them, are absolutely aware that they are going to lose their power in the United States of America, and it's coming very, very quickly. It may not take 30 years. This latest behavior may accelerate that tremendously. So people of color, those of us who realize that we're all people of color, are going to have to refuse to go along to get along any longer. We're all going to have to stand up and say and do exactly what Frederick Douglass told us to do. Power exceeds nothing without a demand. Yeah. Find out what any people will submit to, and it will be inflicted upon them until it is resisted with either words or with blows or with both. And that's what we're going to have to do. We're going to have to join together as a group of human beings and change this situation. The major fear that I hear expressed on college campuses when I go to give a speech is, well, if those people get power, aren't they going to want to do to us what we've done to them? I will never forget what happened in University of Houston. I was sitting on the stage with that fabulous woman who's done everything, has been in prison and the whole bit, you know who I'm talking about. And some white woman said, well, aren't they going to want to get even with us if they get on top? I said, well, let's find out. The 1,500 students in that auditorium, half of them were Black. I said, well, every person in this room who considers himself or herself a member of the Black race, who wants to get even with all white folks, please stand. 3 young Black males stood. The rest of them looked at him like, are you crazy? And this white woman began to relax. She said, oh, I said, isn't that great? See there? Now, let's be honest about this. Well, every Black person in this room who wants to get even with 1 or 2 white people, please stand. They all jumped up, cheering and laughing and high-fiving one another and just tickled to death. And this white woman looked, oh, I said, you see, they don't want to get even with all of us. Each of them wants to get even with 1 or 2. Now, if you want to be comfortable in the future, behave in such a way that you aren't one of the 1 or 2 they want to get even with. Does that make sense to you? And she went, uh-huh. And the Blacks went, yeah. You see, we are going to live with the consequences of our behavior. That simple behavior, that simply psychology. You will live with the consequences of your behavior. Do not ask the community to dictate how you behave. You choose your own behavior. You know the difference between right and wrong. Now do the right thing, God damn it, as my father would say every week. Do the right thing. We know better. Why don't we do better? We don't do better because we are encouraged not to. We're encouraged to maintain the status quo, and you cannot do it. Pale faces, you can't do it. The future is upon us. If you ever read Ben Wattenberg's book, The Birth Dearth, try to get the one that he wrote in 1987. Do not get the later editions because they don't tell what he thought, what his first book said. His first book said, and he gave advice to presidents of the United States. The first paragraph of that book, The Birth Dearth, said, the number one problem in the United States today is there are not enough white babies being born. If we do not fix this and do it soon, white people will be a numerical minority in this country, and this will no longer be a white man's land. Now you see if you can find the 1987 edition of that book, and then you read that to everybody you come to, you force them to read it. He got so much ugliness about it from people who read that he redid the book. And this time he used all kinds of tables and graphs and charts to prove what was happening, which is the reason this nitwit now has closed as many Planned Parenthood clinics as he can, and has put a board, wants to put a wall, of course, the southern border of the United States, because as he has said, brown people reproduce too rapidly. We've got to keep people out of America that aren't Americans. Somebody needs to tell that fool that everybody from the northernmost point of Canada to the southernmost point of South America is an American.
Well, we understand that you're pressed for time. So would you talk about the power of the vote, briefly talk about the power of the vote in this upcoming election?
Absolutely. If we get enough people, you don't even have to be intelligent to decide not to vote against this fool. If we get enough people out to vote, we can turn him out and we can change what's going on in this country. Joe Biden will be there for 4 years, and then he will put that in the hands of whoever he has chosen as his vice president. We just have to get people to vote this person out of power, and we have to get people to vote those who are in the Senate and who are keeping the status quo. We have to get those people out of power if this country is going to survive. I have never seen this country in worse shape than it is right now. I was born in the Great Depression. We were still talking about democracy. We are no longer talking about democracy. We are talking about an oligarchy or autocracy. We do not want either of those things to happen in this country. We could lose our democracy because of this man. If we don't vote him out of office, we could lose our democracy. There's no doubt about that, and there's no doubt in my mind or anybody else's. As far as I'm concerned, this is the most important election we have ever had, and we must do everything we can to see to it that every vote counts, and that those people like Bernie Sanders, who are going to leave their names on the ballot and thereby cut down on the number of votes that Joe Biden is going to get, we have to inform people that the vote for one of those people is a vote against Joe Biden and for Donosaurus T. Rump. And we have to realize that this has to stop. We have to stop him. The people have to stop him.
Knowledge is power. Get out there and vote, please. Thank you, Jane.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much for coming on our show, TD.
Well, you're most welcome, and thank you for having me.
Yes.
And with that, you've been watching Uplifting Communities with our guest, Jane Elliott. I am TD Trice.
I'm Terry A. O'Neill.
And I'm John L. Brown.
Please be sure to like us, friend us on Facebook, check us out on YouTube, Instagram, and Twitter. And we look forward to getting your feedback from the program that you've seen today. Thank you so much for joining us.
All right.